Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world, around the country, around the state, around the city. Welcome to another episode of the Self-Stocking Sisters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Teresa J. Canada, and I am going to continue this discussion. I thank you so much for support of the channel. Please subscribe, share with your friends and family, and maybe not even your friends. You can share with anybody. That would be great. So thank you again for your support and being involved in this process, this journey with me. So today's episode is going to talk about a little bit about the topic that I mentioned in my book about psychological and emotional aspects of impact of desegregation. I did do a talk about this at a college about a year ago. And I just want to emphasize a little bit more information and have you understand the relevancy of it today, and how we can maybe turn things to a different direction in terms of our current situation with the demographics being what they are in this country, that we need to be more focused on, making sure we teach to all, which I believe in. And the sooner the better, not wait till you get to college, not wait till you get to high school, but start early on, because I think that makes the difference. So I'm just going to talk very briefly today about just, the little research and understanding how we can make a difference in our lives and those of the lives around us if we think about how this can impact us. So let me just talk a little bit about psychological and emotional impact of segregation. Now, as I mentioned before in my book, it was in the 1960s, and this occurred, and not much has changed. To be honest with you, not much has changed. But at the same point, let me just talk a little bit about that. I talk about experience that took place with me in my elementary school and the difference between leaving my Harlem community and going to a more predominantly, not a less diverse environment. Even though the environment I left had somewhat diversity as well, because I had a Chinese classmate, I had a friend who was a Puerto Rican in the classroom. So, had different people from, but it was all the same neighborhood in a sense. It wasn't like, because the neighborhoods, of course, you see differences in terms of where people live is where they go to school. So if you don't live in a neighborhood that have different kinds of people, different backgrounds, ethnicities, and so forth and so on, guess what? You're not going to see them. So that is the main thrust of understanding that piece. And the other people who've been talking about how, difference between de facto and de jure segregation. And in the North, of course, it's more of a de facto situation, I believe it was. I think Dr. Carter mentioned that in his talk. If you go back to that episode and watch his episode, you'll learn and hear what he has to say about the different, the Brown decision and, difference between de facto and de jure. He explains it more eloquently than I do. So the key piece is that, when you talk about the psychological impact of children in desegregation or in any situation right now, education is key, and parents want the best for their children. There's no question about it. Even if they don't know it, they still want the best in terms of education. And the attitudes, parents basically have the same attitudes today that they had during the 1960s when my parents chose to allow me to attend PS6 outside of our neighborhood. So, one of the things I want to think about is quality education. Everybody wants a quality education, not just to be in a school, but to have quality within the school. That's so important. And we've kind of drifted away from that. I mean, I even see it in higher education, where it's like, just fulfill, just like have a seat. And, I don't see as much. I'm concerned about the quality of education. And that speaks volumes about not just where I am, but also other parts of the country. If you don't share information about what's going on, how people are going to know, let people be able to give them an idea so they can discern what they feel they want to keep and not keep. So, but at least let the information be out there. And I think, unfortunately, today, we're dealing with a situation where people don't want to expose what's going on or what has happened. And I guess, in a sense, I talk about what happened to me and my classmates, so people can take from that what they want to take from that. But these are not made up. This is not fiction. This is fact. So, how can you say that I didn't exist, that I didn't experience this, And that's just made up? No, it's not. So I'm basically a nonfiction writer. I don't write. I don't write about fiction. I write about the real things that happen in people's lives. And I do research related to real issues and real things that happen in people's lives, like my research on parenting. So, you know, I want to think about how the experiences that take place early on in a child's life can impact their lives forever. There's a talk about, there's some discussion about, basically, I think Ron Edsman was a late researcher and an educator, talked about how Black schools, all Black schools, or schools that were in areas that were just predominantly Black, still students can excel. And I believe that. And apparently, there's an issue about, the whole process of school desegregation and integration. And as we all know, a lot of things changed when schools became desegregated. And I talked at another episode about teachers, And basically, when schools desegregated, like when I went to PS6, we had no Black teachers. We had no brown teachers. We had no diversity in terms of that. None. In my previous school, we did. And that was the neighborhood I lived in. And that's what predominantly Black and Puerto Rican neighborhood. So therefore, that's where you saw in the class. And the teachers, not all were, but still, that's where you saw them. So I'm saying, if you don't come across a teacher who may have some similarity to what you're about or whatever, or if you don't have them there to expose them to other students who've never seen them, then that's a disservice to our society, the world we live in. That's my point of view. I'm not everybody, that's just my point of view. My sense is that share information and people can pick and choose, but to not know that it exists, that's a problem. So studies have shown that students who attended predominantly Black schools had higher aspirations and felt better about themselves than Black students in desegregated school settings. And I can attest to that because I know what happened to me in fourth grade. I don't know if I had a child that age, I don't know if I would have put my child through that because it zaps your self-concept. So children are surrounded by others like themselves. And they have a very little argument about differences. It's easier to be able to say, okay, let me just go and learn this, so forth and so on. But when you have those differences, that's another issue. But the other thing is this: if my teacher in third grade, when I saw her and when I saw her discipline, when I sensed her sense of excellence, she wanted us to be excellent no matter what happened. That was a psychological revelation. Even though I didn't know as a third grader that's what it meant, but that's what it was. And I can say that that's important to every child. And even the children who don't look like the teacher, you need to see a variety of people in different situations and different activities so that you can learn and grow and be exposed. Exposure is key. Exposure is key, all right? Child development experts have already said that academic achievement and a child's emotional and psychological well-being was important in learning. And we're talking about learning here. We're not talking about making stuff up. We're talking about learning. And in any aspect. So if that's lacking, what does it say? If you don't have that support, what does it say? Okay, it says a lot, right? So one of the most effective ways to bring about change in behaviors is to change attitudes. That's key. If you can change the behavior, this is from a psychological point of view. If you can change a person's attitude, you can change their behaviors. But if you're not able to have any impact on the attitudes that people have, then the behavior is going to remain the same or get worse. And the key for me, in terms of my support, is I believe it needs to start earlier than later. It needs to start earlier than later. That's why I'm a proponent for early childhood experiences that expose children to things then, as opposed to wait until you get to high school or even college. So child development experts, other than myself, I don't consider myself an expert in child development per se, that's not my background per se, say that early intervention provides the best opportunity for behavioral change in children. Point blank. That's what they say, the studies have shown. And I believe that because I look at my own life as an example. And then I can compare it to my other siblings in terms of what may have made the difference. I believe my early exposure to those kinds of settings and having the support, of course, of family and home and, communities, that made a difference too. So if you want to be able to intervene in terms of the psychological and emotional impact of children, it needs to start early and need to be understanding that you need to expose children to certain things so they can build upon the exposure they have. And we talk about healthy and versus unhealthy environments for children. We all know now what the healthy environments are like, and we all know what the unhealthy environments are like. There are key issues that are important for the most frequent outcomes of desegregation was for most children, especially Black and brown children, was they became more anxious. They had, their self-concept was a question, who am I? What am I about? That was like up in limbo. They were trying to define who they were, and their aspirations was questioned. So those are the most frequent outcomes of school desegregation. Now, the results from desegregation, segregated schools, no more anxious, higher self-esteem and aspirations in segregated schools, and positive support by the teachers. So if you have children who are part of a school desegregation process, and I think many of my guests who've spoken about their own experiences will attest to that, it's a very anxiety-provoked situation. It affects them emotionally, and in many cases, sometimes physically, all right? And their whole sense of self-concept, who are they? What are they about? Because it's not being nurtured and enhanced. It's being torn apart in those situations. So what's going to help them to feel good about themselves as they move forward in life? And as a matter of fact, and children spend a lot of time in school, other than those who go homeschool. But if you're going to actually go into a public school, and what we're referring to now, then you're going to be exposed to a lot of education every day, okay, when you go to school. And what does it say about how do you feel about yourself? What does it say about your aspirations of what you want to accomplish? Because that too starts early on. If you're not exposed to a situation where you feel you can accomplish something or you can achieve something and you can aspire to become something, guess what? Then you just won't. You just won't. You can't expect it to occur when you're a senior in high school. You can't expect it to occur if you do, in fact, get admitted to get accepted to college. If you even pursue college education, or if you want to work in a technological field, what is it you need to have to keep you inspired, to make you feel like you can attain that. That all takes place. That all takes place in the classrooms early on. And what you're exposed to early on determines basically what you end up doing later on. And that's why it's so important that we have teachers in the classroom. We have those who can inspire students to excel and to pursue opportunities that come about, but also provide them with the foundation they need in terms of literacy, which we don't talk much about. I mean, maybe everyone's not going to be physicists, but at the same time, some children don't even know what a physicist is or exists. So sharing that information is an important thing as well. And maybe I need to get one of my friends who's a physicist to come and talk to you about that and tell them what a physicist does. And I'm thinking about that. That may be the next person I contact to be a guest. And even if it's like 5 or 10 minutes, that still works. So people need to know and need to see that this person exists. All right. Those are some of the top topics, I wanted to share with you in terms of if you want a child to excel, they need to have early exposure. All right. And also the fact that emotionally, what a child goes through when they don't have the kinds of things they need to have. Okay. And if I go back to my book, some of the questions I asked the women, young ladies, girls in the book, when they were women, I interviewed them, of course, would they, would they prefer that this experience at 6, which we went through, be repeated? And there were mixed responses to that question. How this experience affected them psychologically and emotionally is debatable. Based on their responses, each woman stated that economic differences were the single most important factor in their PS6 experience. Now, I'm just saying that not much of that has changed because, of course, we know that schools that are in better funded neighborhoods provide more for their children than those who don't have the resources in the other neighborhoods. So school funding is important. but not just school funding, just flat school funding, but still also you need to have excellent teachers who believe every child in that classroom has the opportunity to excel or has potential to excel. And that's not the case oftentimes. And that occurred for us when I was young. There was a teacher who dismissed us and felt that we weren't quality material. She somehow felt like, why are we there? We're taking the space from someone else. And fortunately, those of us who were able to, we were able to connect with other classmates or from people in our community or parents or organizations that supported us and encouraged us, emotionally to keep going. So that's why I said about the psychological, emotional impact of desegregation is something else. So this argument about, do we like now here we are 70 years post Brown decision, and what difference has it made? Now I'll talk about that in another episode, but think about that. Looking at the experience of people who've gone through the desegregation process in the North specifically, or in Midwest during the 60s and 70s, and looking at where we are now. If you talk to people who've experienced it, they'll tell you. Many of them will say, "Well, I would have been fine just staying in my all Black elementary school, my all Black middle school, if we had quality education, excellent teachers, if we had supplies and materials, enhancements that are needed." They would have preferred to stay in some of those situations, right? So, I'm not going to go into the Brown decision now, but I'll go talk about that in another episode in terms of, the whole issue of, the purpose of trying to make sure that schools had the kind of equal materials for every student, no matter where school they attended. But the other thing is that the research has shown that it's not so bad being in an all Black school. But there are some informal things that take place, that we don't think about. Unfortunately, here we are in 2024 talking about the same issues. What is it that we're going to do differently? Okay. So we're talking about the emotional and psychological impact that this has on every child that goes through this experience and how they come out of that. And that makes a huge difference. So I'm thinking we have to think of a different way in which to do this. We can't continue the same path we've been doing in the past. And we need different ways to think because the demographics in this country require that we do that. All right. It requires that we do that. And it's not all just economic anymore because, it's still a difference, but still it's not all just economic. It's also dealing with the fact that there's some children who believe they're not able to, they're not successful, they won't be successful, they don't have the opportunities, and they don't feel worthy of having an excellent opportunity to learn in a quality school. That's the other issue. So the emotional perspective says a lot about how a person feels about themselves. If a person really believes that they're a worthy person, then they can pursue anything they want to pursue. But if a child doesn't feel that they're a worthy person, and even adults, but even a child, what does it say about our society? What does it say about that person? What does it say about us? And that right now is a big challenge. And I see that, as a professor, as an educator, as a professor in particular, and as a researcher, that we need to continue. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. There was there was a college that used the phrase about the mind. It's a terrible, I can't remember the phrase, but anyway, think about sometimes if you see it, you can believe, you can do it, you can see it, if you believe it, if you can see it, but then sometimes you may not see it, but you have to believe it, even not seeing it. That's what I'm saying. So that happens a lot because you may not see, you may not ever see another person who looks like me in your entire educational pursuit. And that's unfortunate in this state, especially, as we get further along in terms of the educational ladder. And mostly, of course, people know that most teachers, elementary teachers, a significant number of them are female teachers. And you don't really see a more significant number of male teachers when you get to middle school. What's called middle school now, and high school. And we're going to have an episode talk about higher education later. So we'll deal with the higher education issues a little later. But right now, I want you to understand that we can work with these young people. And the point is, don't dismiss the fact that children who are from desegregated schools, they're more anxious. They're no more anxious than anybody else. They have higher self-esteem and aspirations in their segregated schools. And they also are provided positive support by the teachers. And I spoke about that in one of my episodes about my third grade teacher. When I saw her, I'm like, I can do anything. I mean, people know me, like, not that I didn't think that before I saw her, but once I saw this Black teacher, I said, okay, now this is my first, and I didn't see another Black teacher until junior high school. Yeah, I was in junior high school. It's called junior high school back in the day. It's called middle school now. Junior high school back in the day was 7th, 8th, and 9th. And the high school was 10th, 11th, and 12th. So now I think the configuration is 6, 7, and 8 middle school. No, 6, 7, and 8. And then 9 to 11, 12 is high school, I believe, in most situations nowadays. But I'm just saying to you, there's a shortage of teachers, of many, a shortage of Black and brown teachers, period. Okay, there's a shortage across. I don't care. It's just all across the board, and there's a reason behind that. And it's also there's a variety of reasons, and I'll maybe discuss that in other situations. But the key piece is about how you can change behaviors. If you can change a person's attitude, you can change their behaviors, and that goes for the children, as well as the parents, as well as the teachers, as well as administrators, from kindergarten, nursery, all the way up to college and graduate school. And I'll be talking about higher education issues a little later, but I just wanted to take this time to talk about those specific issues in terms of the psychological impact and emotional impact of the desegregation. It wasn't all great, all right? And also the issue about if they had stayed in their own school would have made a difference. And according to research, it probably would have been better for many Black and brown children. So we can debate that moving forward. But right now, I just want to share with you information. So we'll talk about it later. So thank you again for being here with me with another episode of Silk Stockings podcast. Please subscribe. Please share it with your friends and families, and even people who aren't your friends. You can share with them too. I'm sure they may need to learn something as well. So do that, and we'll see you next time on another episode of the Silk Stocking Sisters. Have a good day. Thank you, everybody. Bye now.